You're listening to Beast Over Burden, powered by Barbell Logic.
We're Nikki and Andrew, your personal professional coaches.
We help you take control of your fitness through hard but doable training and nutrition practices that fit your busy life.
Build a stronger, healthier version of yourself with lifelong habits. Hello, beasts. Welcome to Beast Over Burden, powered by Barbell Logic. Nikki Sims here. With me is Andrew Jackson.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So, getting towards the end of this series here, where we get to talk about how to make this baseline that we've talked about, how to make these behaviors work for you. And sometimes what that means is how to make changes to those behaviors, to make changes to your composition, make changes to your energy, make changes to your sports performance. So that's what we're going to cover today. And a theme that we keep coming back to is consistency and what you have to do to set yourself up for success. So we're going to touch on those important mindsets and choices today as well. So Andrew, when you get your baseline established, which you do a pretty good job of like switching gears right into it, and you see how that fits. And you also, I noticed you see how that fits in your life. What have you noticed you do when you're like, okay, back at the baseline, what changes do you tend to make and why? Do you eat more of certain things? Do you eat less of certain things? What do you look for?
Probably the biggest change is that I am only eating things that are in that set baseline at essentially fixed meals. There's not a whole lot happening in between. Or if there is, I would recognize that as deviation or something that I would need to watch out for. So snacks, essentially, or drinks that have calories in them, which could be alcohol. You know, if I had beer while watching the Super Bowl, that's not in the baseline.
But other sneaky caloric drinks would be like coffee from Starbucks that has like the syrups in it. Could be sodas. Yeah, it could be sweetener and tea, stuff like that.
That typically isn't a problem for my eating patterns, but for some people, there are a lot of calories that can sneak in. And I think that's actually one of the benefits of tracking for some period of time while you're establishing your baseline is that you start to recognize how many calories you're actually getting from some of the foods that you eat. And I also notice behaviorally from some of my clients that just tracking, they don't eat a lot of things that they normally would because either they don't want to have to track it or they notice when they're in the midst of even entering in, like, holy cow, I did not realize that was 200 or 300 calories. But for me, it's one of the most powerful aspects of the baseline that I go back to is that it's almost entirely whole food. And that's critical because then I can see all of the macros that I'm getting. You can visually see the protein. You can visually see the fiber, the carbohydrates, the fat. And that is what gives me the ability to adjust based on however my body changes. So as we talked about, protein's constant. So what it really sets me up for with those 4 meals a day, I know I'm hitting my protein. And then from there, I have a starting point that we're calling our baseline that I am able to do consistently without a whole lot of effort. I'm used to shopping for that. I'm used to cooking it. I'm used to building those plates. So it's almost like the Steve Jobs, black turtleneck and washed out pants and New Balance shoes. Like he just wakes up and you put that on every day. My daily routine when I'm getting back into this gear feels a little bit like that. I'm not really having to think a whole lot about it. And I have a lot of control over the total calories, and I can repeat it every single day.
Would you say your baseline is one that puts you in a caloric deficit?
Yeah. I mean, okay. I am a easy gainer. I have never had problems
you seem
gaining
to be
weight.
An easy loser also
in my life. Some people's baseline might need to be adding more calories to ensure that they're getting enough protein and calories. I tend to need to, when I'm switching back, do the opposite. Although I do think that when I'm not paying attention to it, I'll tend to under eat protein.
Yeah. Okay.
So I am noticing, and I think I'm feeling the benefit in my training actually, though, even I'm in a deficit as measured by body weight going down, my training is actually going better right now because I think I'm getting way more protein more consistently. So that's fun. But yeah, normally I would say I'm defaulting to a deficit.
Yeah. Like it seems like that puts you in a pretty significant deficit because you tend to add more things to it. Like you'll add more rice, or
Right.
you will add like maybe a more substantial lunch. I see you'll do stuff like that when you feel that feeling that you don't feel so often of, oh, I'm hungry.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I actually pay attention to as a gauge that I'm moving further along the deficit is that I'll start to wake up hungry. I will notice that I'm feeling hungry, in an increasing amount of times throughout the day. If I never feel hungry, I can pretty much guarantee I'm in a surplus.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right?
What are your hunger signals?
Just feel like my stomach feels
Yeah.
kind of
Empty and sad.
empty. Yeah, like it's. I think there's some more subtle ones sometimes where I'll start craving something and I can't quite put my finger on it. I think sometimes that happens, and I'll just start like reaching for things. That's where I need to be mindful because
So you're like, I think I'll snack.
if I have snacks in the house, I mean, I would say one very effective strategy for me is to just avoid having snacks in the house, because if there's something easy to grab in the pantry,
Yep.
I will often go there. And, like right now, we've got a bunch of chips left over from shopping for
When we had our team
a
meeting.
non-standard event.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And now they're just kind of there looking at me, and they're just really easy to grab.
And they're so tasty. Yeah.
Whereas if I have apples around, or, cucumber I could slice up, that one helps me when I have that hankering to have something that doesn't add quite as many calories. But the biggest thing for me is getting into that consistent whole food pattern, because that's what allows me to titrate up or down by, like you said, adding more rice, taking out walnuts, or, taking out nuts from the snack, or adding vegetables, if I'm not getting as much fiber as I know I would like to get. But by being whole food that's visible, that's where I feel like I get the control. If I were eating a whole bunch of things that were highly processed or combined, it gets really hard to manage consistent macros. I have a couple of eyeball rule of thumbs if I'm eating soups or something where I know the ingredients.
Yeah.
But it does make it a little bit harder.
Yeah. One thing that we really went into this wanting to talk about is like, when you want to make changes, you have to start with two things: figuring out what you want and then establishing a baseline. So if someone wants to gain weight, what would you suggest they do to their baseline?
Assuming they have their protein target established and they're hitting that consistently, they're going to need to add more
fats or carbs.
And I would tend to steer people towards carbs for a couple of reasons. One, you're going to get more calories from relatively easier to manage sources, meaning it's really easy to overdo oil, fats. It's just 9 calories per gram. So if you make a mistake in a measurement mistake or whatever, you just add more than you think you are, you're getting an error on 9 calories per gram versus carbohydrates, which are 4 calories per gram. So you have twice as much impact of a measurement error. Number 2 is you're assuming you make good quality choices with your carbohydrates and you're not just eating sugar, which I don't recommend. You're going to get more fiber. So I think you get more bang for your buck, more return on the invested calories by increasing carbohydrates from good quality carbohydrates. And when I say good quality, I mean relatively high fiber as a percentage of those calories.
And what if someone starts by establishing their baseline and they want to keep training but lose body fat? So then on the opposite end, I would first look for opportunities to eliminate added fats,
just because, again, it's a huge return on investment. If you take out 1 gram of fat, you're taking out 9 calories versus carbohydrates. You have to take out twice as much food volume. So I think that also helps with managing hunger, which I think is another aspect of being in a deficit, is that you want to eat lots of whole foods with a lot of fiber because that's going to help with satiety. So I think the low-hanging fruit is, well, one, I would, as a starting point, recommend, as we've said many times, cut the alcohol out entirely. Honestly, if you're genuinely high priority to lose body fat, that is the lowest hanging fruit you can go for. After that, I look at VFDs for added fats, cheese on salad, dressings, oil, extra butter on your bread, things like that.
The type of dairy that you're eating. Yeah.
That's an excellent point. Switching from whole milk to non-fat milk. Or if you're adding it to your coffee, heavy creamer to non-fat, or whatever alternative you prefer.
The cuts of meat that you eat.
Lean meats, exactly. Anything where you have control over the fat content, just look for those and find a lower fat option.
And there is such a thing of not eating enough fat.
Yeah, I think that for most adult males, for 2 reasons, anything less than like 70 or 80 grams is not optimal for 2 reasons. One, I think your food just starts to taste terrible.
Yeah.
When you talk about the consistency and sustainability, when you start getting around 80, 70 grams, you're eating a lot of tilapia and grilled chicken breast
and egg whites.
and
Yeah.
egg whites. It just comes just really hard to sustain that. Then 2, there's also a point where your hormones will start to be negatively impacted.
Yep.
Particularly your sex hormones. So testosterone production starts to take a dip, and so you start to feel like just overall well-being is negatively affected.
Brain fog.
Yeah, I don't know those numbers if they're different for women, but
I prefer when women are above 50. When I see numbers consistently in the 40s, like that's when people stop feeling very good.
Yeah.
And so I really think like if they can do well and make good choices with, what other foods they're eating around 60, it's more sustainable way to eat, more flavor, and better for not having stretches of the day where you just feel starving because fat actually, well, with carbohydrates, and especially if they're things like oatmeal or something really complex and high fiber, like you said, that can make you feel satisfied longer. When you're really low fat, even if you eat really high volume of carbohydrates, you still go through those times during the day where you're just like so starving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that leads to like, oh, screw it, I'm just going to snack.
I've had meals where, you eat this enormous salad.
Yeah.
And just can't ever feel full.
All you got out of it is a jaw workout.
Or you feel hungry like 20 minutes later, or there's just something missing. There's this lack of...
That's how a protein shake feels to me is, those are pretty low fat generally, high protein, but you're just like, man, that, and like no fiber. So,
and you get a big insulin spike and then crash.
Yeah.
I've also been reading more about the rate at which you consume calories can significantly impact the glycemic load and the insulin spike.
Oh, sure.
A lot of my clients are now wearing insulin monitors, and they can tell a difference not only in the rate, but the order in which they eat their food.
Oh, wow.
So if they eat the carbohydrates first, they get a big spike. But if they have some protein, some fiber, and some fats, and then the carbohydrates, it moderates the insulin spike, which sometimes that can change people's satiety experience,
Big time.
So you can definitely go down a rabbit hole there, but to get back to your original question, having experimented in the past with the pure, if it fits your macros perspective, I think technically that is correct, but the reality is your subjective experience is very different when you try to keep your fat somewhere between, for a guy, I think an average, 200 plus pound guy, 70 to 100 grams of fat, and then get the rest from good carbohydrates, again, relatively high fiber, for a couple of reasons. Obviously, you get more fiber, but then again, that margin for error. When you start going over 100 grams of fat, the odds that you're actually getting 110, 120, 130 grams of fat, and you're just like, I can't figure out why I'm not losing weight. I'm on this X amount of calories. Odds are you're not actually on that number of calories.
Hmm.
and you have some error. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
that's my first lever to pull. Also for me, when I go to my baseline, if I'm not losing weight, that's when I start pulling out the added fats. That's my first lever. And then I'll go to the carbs and start moderating those down gradually.
And sometimes you really need to see actually how accurate you are being. If you are weighing and measuring, you're never going to be 100% accurate because there's just error in measuring and even the numbers that we get using our apps. There's some degree of error. But if you're just eyeballing, you might be eyeballing in the direction that's not to your favor.
Yeah. My general rule of thumb there is to measure protein, carbs, and fats if they're added fats. And vegetables, though, I don't have no limit on.
Yeah. I was talking about that recently. It's like if you're eating like 2 bananas, like you track the bananas. That's a
Sure.
caloric impact.
Yeah.
But don't worry about weighing your salad greens. Eat the salad greens, eat the handful of, tomatoes, eat your green beans. Like the behavior we want is to eat vegetables. So
Yes.
don't make it high friction.
Vegetables, keyword, importantly different from my perspective than salads. Because if you tell people you can eat all the salad you want, then you start seeing these Cobb salads pop up.
Yeah.
And I swear, salad in restaurant speak means thing that has a lot of cheese on it.
So cheesy. Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah. And like way too expensive for what you're eating.
this overpriced cheese ball that has iceberg lettuce and some sort of
Bacon.
Caesar dressing and bacon and all these added things that you're like, I look at my clients like, I typically eat a salad lunch, and then you go look at the salad and it's like a 3,000 calorie cheese bomb.
Like you could make a whole delicious enchilada out of that salad.
If you put that in the microwave for 45 seconds, it would be an enchilada, actually. Yeah. When you go onto your baseline, what are levers that you pull? How do you adjust based on what's happening?
Well, it seemed for me, it usually significantly slows the surplus that I'm likely in from all my fun, or it puts me in a very noticeable deficit. When I am tracking, let me think here how I've done it before. I've done it a couple of different ways where I would go to my baseline, and in doing so, that means getting rid of alcohol, making sure I'm hitting my protein, and then I usually will start to eat around like 2,000 to 2,400 calories. And what I noticed this year is I started higher than I did the year before, and I just felt starving. And I was so uncomfortable that I upped my calories a little bit to like 2,600, and the lower range day was 2,100. But then it's like my appetite and hunger signals changed, and I wasn't as starving. It's like my energy recalibrated. Maybe it's from taking all that time off from drinking, which really affects my hunger signals and my appetite. But I was eventually able to get back down to like 1,900 to 2,200. So I ended up lowering my calories, and that actually feels pretty good.
Let me just to clarify, even at a higher daily calorie target, you were more hungry this year than last year.
Yes. Yeah. But I do remember also having a period of time when I first put in my macro rules where I was really starving, and then I upped my calories then.
Yeah, that was my memory, is that you started out significantly lower and you were kind of running out of gas, like training and fatigue was pretty high.
I also got leaner a lot faster last time.
So that's what you were trying to avoid this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Those calorie numbers end up being within, 200 calories of each other. So it's like pretty small changes. And protein's always there, 150. And then I don't really have a caloric or fat target. I don't eat low fat. My fat usually ends up being like 80, 80 grams. That makes me feel pretty good. So then, it's more about like, am I going to add more rice? Am I going to probably sometimes eat more ice cream? But then I have to put a limit on that because of all the added sugars.
You triangulate with added sugar, which is not one that I really pay much attention to personally, but for you, that seems to help a lot with food quality.
Yeah, big time. And man, tough learning for me this year was we were so into Dave's Killer Bread and those delicious everything bagels, but they have a decent amount of added sugars in them that if I was like, well, I'll have half bagel for breakfast, then I'll have a sandwich. And that coupled with my staple of ice cream, all of a sudden became too high. So the ice cream must stay, the bread goes.
I'm just laughing here that the, what you called it, painful lesson learned or something, is
brutal.
Going to the whole wheat bread. It was not, wow, ice cream has a lot of added sugars.
That is my non-negotiable. Like,
this
ice cream
whole wheat
stays.
bread really snuck up on me.
But I replaced it for a vegetable. So good choice. But anyway, yeah, for me, it's just dialing up the calories. And because I weigh and measure, it becomes that simple. And then I have to, like, it really does. We've talked about this before, and I have a hard time with it. Like, the amount of time I live with those calorie changes really matters, because I'll have spikes of being like, I'm starving, I'm tired. And the next day it's like, I'm fine. And is that the calories, or is it just my hormones? Is it the weather? I don't know. I'm all over the place. So I have to at least create something stable for like 2 to 3 weeks before
I think you really got to let it ride out for a while.
Yeah.
And the more extreme the change, the more discomfort it's going to be, which I think might have been what happened this year versus last year, is that the Q4 nutrition to Q1, we made some pretty radical changes.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was quite so dramatic the previous year.
I don't think it was. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I think it'd be good to talk about how to stay consistent. And this is something you brought up around like the foods that you actually make and are eating. We really do want to make these actual habits, which means you are going to do them for, 3 months. And if you're eating food that doesn't make you feel full or happy with what you're eating, or if it's high sugar food and your blood sugar is all over the place all day, then we don't get to be consistent with it. And then it becomes easier to just be like, screw this. I just want to eat what I want to eat. And I remember I sent you something on Instagram last week or something. It was one of those like, follow me to see what I eat in a day of 150 grams of protein. It was some female lifter. And her food just looked so yucky. It was like, her morning was like a protein bar and a coffee. And then I think she had a real meal at some point of like rice and meat. And then there was like a container of candy. And like the food choices just seemed so lacking in nutrients and flavor. And it was packaged. And that's one thing that gets really tough when you're really tracking your macros is, it's so easy to just scan a barcode.
Very tempting.
So easy.
Yep.
But you're dealing with like sugar alcohols. You're dealing with things that might make you bloated. You're dealing with things that actually make your appetite all over the place.
Yep.
Versus when you're eating the type of foods that you were talking about, where you can see, this is chicken equals protein. This is potatoes equals carbs. I measured, a tablespoon of olive oil when I was making this. I can see all that and it's very clear. But you have to have a place where you like to cook. So you have to have a kitchen and you have to know how to shop. And then you have to like get some reps in of knowing what you like to eat and don't like to eat, because that produce can go bad really quickly.
I think that's the unspoken skill behind sustainable nutrition is meal prep or cooking. Essentially. If you either don't have the time or the ability to cook your own food in a way that you like, you're kind of stuck going down the packaged route.
And there are more meal prep services now that seem pretty good. Yeah.
I recommend that to all of my clients that are busy, that have the means to do it, which it is becoming increasingly affordable. I was shocked the other day, actually, because I was looking up a meal prep service and it was roughly $15 a meal, which was what I remember it being in 2017, the last time I did meal prep. It was still at like $12 to $15 a meal, which, factoring in inflation, seems crazy to me. That would be significantly more affordable than it was then. And there's just more local options. But if you get proficient at cooking and you have a good set of tools and, you get into your baseline of cooking as well, I don't think it takes as much time as it might seem at first.
Yeah.
There's a lot of influencers out there that say, well, once you're making more than $15 or $20 an hour, you should be buying all of your meals.
Yeah, meal prep. Yeah.
Again, if you can do the math and it makes sense and you can get a source of food that is consistent and fits your macros and has fiber and good vegetables, great. I mean, I love Goop. Shout out to Gwyneth Paltrow.
She's got a Goop restaurant down in Costa Mesa.
As much as I can't stand her content, her salad restaurant is amazing.
Restaurant's great. So good. Can I tell you my 4 kitchen essentials?
Yeah, let's hear them.
For success. An Instapot, because it makes great shredded meat and rice. Cooks soups really well in it. The Maiden griddle that we've talked about. So easy to cook on. It's easy to clean. Everything tastes delicious. It's just such a no-brainer. We just discovered an immersion blender, which, oh my gosh, that means you can like weigh everything really easily and then you can blend it and it's delicious. I've been making really good protein shakes. We haven't even gotten into smoothies yet.
Makes traditional blenders seem ridiculous.
Yeah, so easy to clean, doesn't take up any space.
Yep.
And then coming at number 4 for favorite kitchen success is you, because you do a lot of really good cooking.
Well,
cook a lot of delicious meats.
Take that vote and replace it with a grill and or smoker. But like a gas barbecue is such an easy way to make meat, whatever kind you want, right? If you can get a couple of marinades under your belt, then you can make a huge variety of really tasty chicken breast. You know, steaks are easy to cook on either the griddle or the barbecue. Lately, I've been replacing lunch meat with a couple of cheap cuts of steak, and I just throw it on the griddle for, 2 minutes. And it's way better than lunch meat and cheaper than lunch meat. Lunch meat is insanely expensive now.
Lunch meat is so expensive. It's like $16 a pound.
$16+ a pound. And I can go get $3-4 a pound for, whatever the tri-tip steak is or whatever I've got, and throw that on the grill for 3 minutes and it's delicious. And I just make a sandwich out of that, cut it in half.
And you've been making like huge batches of chicken. That's been really helpful.
Easy to make chicken. I can get chicken at like $3 or $4 a pound.
Yeah.
And you just cook that all up in one session on the grill.
Well, the reason I said you is like, I hate cooking meat. The only meat I will tolerate cooking is bacon and ground beef. Like, I don't want to mess with anything else, which is why I wouldn't eat lunch. I would just have yogurt for lunch. So yeah, if you can find someone who will cook meat for you or get good yourself at cooking meat, big breakthrough.
Yeah. If you can stabilize your source of protein, that I think now you've got the most critical building block to your baseline, right? Is start with the protein and having just a bunch of chicken or easy to cook steak or meat, beef, ground beef available. Now you can have other things that you easily just add to build out your meal. But those 4 things have been game changers: Instapot, griddle, immersion blender, and a barbecue or a smoker. That just makes cooking really fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would toss in there the book. I think I've mentioned this before.
Ooh, yeah.
Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, which gives you principles for cooking that you can apply to whatever recipe or style of cooking that you want. And that has just sort of liberated, I think, me from feeling like I need to follow some exact script every time I'm cooking. And I have more confidence experimenting with salt, fat, acid, and heat, and just exchanging the variables of my baseline to build whatever I want, whatever meal I want. And there's also some great resources. If we can find them, post them in the show notes. But Precision Nutrition had a great series a few years ago where they basically took the major ethnic flavors from around the world and were just like, you can take these same ingredients and you mix and match the spices, and essentially the spices and the salt and the fat and the acid a little bit different. Now you have Indian food. Now you have Mexican food. Now you have, an Asian style recipe. And, if you can break things down into their fundamental building blocks, it's actually relatively easy and pretty fun to build meals. So, without going down the rabbit hole of feeling like we have to put out a bunch of recipes, I would just encourage people, if you can invest a little bit of time in learning some fundamentals of how to prepare your own food, or if you don't have the time, invest the money into some sort of a meal prep so that you can be more consistent and avoid those big crashes.
Yeah.
Speaking of avoiding crashes, I would have to say one of the biggest lessons you've been learning is how often
I
you
have
need to eat.
very frequently. I must have many feedings.
It's not bro science. You got to be able to eat like
I
constantly.
need to eat like every 2 to 3 hours. Yeah.
But anyways, now we've devolved.
Okay. I would say, like we went over in a couple different episodes, is figure out what you want and then create a baseline. The baseline is your foundation to have something consistent and yet have something really stable that you can make changes from. And knowing what you want, you'll have a moment where it's very clear, and then you have to kind of keep fleshing that out based on how things feel when you start making little changes. And, the other component with that is time. Like, give things enough time for you to see how you feel in different circumstances.
And play with time as a variable on perspective.
Yes. Is this what I want right now at this party? Or is this what I want in 3 months when I really envisioned this goal of mine that really drives me? And ideally, this baseline isn't just something that you do, for a couple months because you have a big goal of like being in a swimsuit in Mexico in less than 4 weeks. But it's something that you go back to when you've, gotten a little bit uncomfortable. You can always go back to this baseline because a successful baseline keeps you fueled. It has food choices that are high nutrient, high protein, and it's something that you can actually do.
And enjoy.
Yeah. It's something that you can cook with. It's something that you can repeat for weeks at a time.
And flexible enough that you could be in different circumstances. You don't have to be in this perfect
vacuum,
white knuckle, locked in your house eating a fixed menu. If you define the baseline, it might need to start very controlled, but it can expand. But eventually you should be able to go to a restaurant and find something on the menu that fits. You might have to give it, a little margin for error, but you can still find things out and about at a gas station or a restaurant. Is it going to be perfect? No, but you can find your lean meat, vegetables, carbohydrates that aren't ultra processed and covered in a bunch of added fats. I think that's part of the art behind the science, is building confidence and building your palette of things that you can find that fit your baseline in whatever context that you're in.
And that's where you get the freedom back. It's like, okay, I have all of these choices now.
Exactly.
Where it maybe starts as feeling like a limitation. The more you practice, the more you're just like, oh, I have freedom to choose this. And that's what will support what is really important to me.
I was just explaining the wax on, paint the fence, Karate Kid thing to my daughter the other day. And I think a lot of the tools that are out there known as diets are really paint the fence and wax on, wax off. Yes, weighing and measuring, and if it fits your macros is great. But to get to physical freedom on a nutrition front, you need to be more clear on what you want and how you're feeling when you eat those foods, and then build out a palette of options that you can pick from wherever you are, whatever you're doing, that fit into your baseline and what you need, and also feel good and support your training.
Yeah, feeling good is nice.
And then we wrapped up with common pitfalls and problems, ways to adjust, and then how to flex your baseline based on what's happening and where you want to go.
Yeah. I hope this is something you can use and come back to as often as you need it. It'll always be there for you. You'll learn as you build muscle. It's going to change. Your body's going to need different things. It's going to need different energy. And this exists for you to create a state for your body to build or at least maintain muscle. And that's really, really important. So have fun being beasts. Be a beast, not a burden. Thank you, Andrew. And we will see you for the next series. I'm excited. And if you have any questions, please send them to us. You can find us on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Nikki in the Gym with a period between each word. Nikki.in.the.gym. Andrew is?
Andrew Barbender.
Andrew Barbender on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
We would love a review. We'd love a share.
I'd like to hear what people took away from this series, if anything. If they've tried making any changes, what people's baselines might look like for them.
Yeah. You can email us that at podcast@barbell-logic.com.
Please do.
Till next time. Bye bye.
Bye bye.